The bow breathes with the music. What we know for sure about that period, we do know actually that they vibrated. They vibrate not every note, but they vibrated important note in a phrase or to show a certain harmony. We know that. We have Leopold Mozart's father's book who says, talks about vibrato. The one thing we know they couldn't do as well as we do is to sustain the bow. And the reasons for that are first because they used real gut strings. So gut strings, if you put a little bit of weight on it and you try to sustain it, will crack. That's why they have what they call a schwung, they touch and go. And the other thing with the bow is that the bow was different. The Baroque bow is different than our modern bow. So it was much lighter in a different shape. So it's very hard to sustain. Now, what does it mean to sustain? To sustain means that you don't lift the bow from the string. It's glued to the string. If you play Bach, like you did, it's very beautiful, but you played and you kept going. Now, it's very beautiful, but when you go and play Brahms, you would do the same thing with the bow. You would sustain it. Sustaining meaning you're not letting it jump away from the bow, from the string.
Right.
So what I would suggest for you is to experiment first with speaking rather than singing with Bach, just simply because it was more common to do so. So instead of playing legato, try to play with the same intention that you have musically, but to speak, to separate the bows, because that's what they would do. If you leave, I call it home ground, for you is like the third quarter of the bow, right here. It's very hard to lift it from the string, because to make sound, you have to attach yourself to the string. So you play 90% of the time here. You are trying to separate more, but you are still glued to the string. However, if you go to middle to frog, it's what I call the speaking area of the bow. It's much easier for you to lift it, to let it, as you said, to let it breathe. So the bow breathes with the music instead of being glued to the string. Now we're talking. Now Bach would sound different than Brahms. However, within this kind of language, I want to give you 5 options that would be cool for you to experiment. 5 options of bowings. And those 5 options, as you know, we don't have Bach's original bowings for cello suites. We do have them for the violin sonatas and partitas, and we have Anna Magdalena's Bach copy of his original. We don't have the original. So we can draw from the violin partitas and sonatas, and we can draw from other pieces of that time what would have been most likely the bowings. Yeah. So what is most commonly done if you have a group of 4 60 notes are 5 options. First options is separate bows. If you take 4 notes, let's say G, F, E, D. Second option would be 2 and 2. Third option would be 1 and 3. Fourth option would be 3 and 1. And fifth option would be just legato, like you played the whole thing. Now, there are more options if you go deep into it, but those I call it the baby language of Bach. Because baby language meaning I have only few words, like mom, dad, food, sleep, tired, whatever. Yeah? So, if I give you these 5 options, again, I repeat it, separate, 2 and 2, 1 and 3, 3 and 1, and legato. If I ask you to do like sort of a jam session, Baroque jam session, so you can improvise the bowings according to those 5 elements. Try now to do that. So do it slower. You see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
So I'm improvising according to the 5 options I would imagine Bach would feel common with, instead of just one option which you did. Yeah, that's one option and that's glued to the string. Okay, so think a little bit about those 5 options and let's see if you can do, as I said, an improvisation, a jam session of bowings within those 5 options.